Against this right back, Charlie's definitely.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. Showtime. People deluded, I'm back again. I can barely contain my excitement because this is a content creator that I've done a video with before that I'm happy to have back here. People, you need to subscribe to this guy. He's a tactical genius and he dumbs it down in such a great way. Harvey, how you doing, man? Happy to have you back, man.
Mate, I'm so excited to be back as well. I really enjoy talking to you, and I can't thank you enough.
Likewise.
For really kind words. Yeah, I've been busy. I've been doing my thing. I've been stuck doing university work, so that's why I've been a bit quieter recently. But we're slowly building up back videos now, and yeah, I'm enjoying watching Arsenal at the moment as well.
Like you said, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying your content. Happy to see you're kicking on all cylinders, much like our team. I want to kick this stream off with a bit of a, not a left field question, but kind of putting you on the spot immediately. Do you think we'll win the league?
You know what? As of about 2 weeks ago, and really from about November time, I've really been in the camp that we will win the league. I mean, in my predictions at the start of the year, I said that we would win the league. The way I look at it now, though, I see us as on merit, probably the best side out of the three. But I don't see us as title favourites actually at the moment. I think as soon as if you put the volume of fixtures certainly, and then their qualitative level as well, I just think it puts us slightly behind the pack. I mean, it's a very close run thing. I mean, I think it's probably the first time in the whole season that you could argue that Liverpool are favourites, and that's something that I don't think many of us expected towards the start of the year. I'd probably put us just behind them at the moment. But look, I mean, it could change tonight. That's how quickly things change, and it's a very close run thing.
What gives you what gave you confidence / what has given you confidence that we'll get this over the line?
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, it's been my viewpoint for the majority of the season that we have been the best side in the league. I think we have been the best side in the league since about November, and that coincides with the Ødegaard change in role, giving him more responsibility, a bigger zone of influence, making him a more sort of all-phase package as a midfielder. It's also coincided with him dropping deeper, giving Saka more space. I mean, we forget that the start of the season, although our attacking numbers and our offensive dynamics were subpar, Saka was, and Nketiah to a large extent as well, were really carrying our attack on their backs. But it's coincided with certainly those two roles and the return, of course, of players to fitness. But I think at the moment, a big thing I've spoken about on the channel is Arteta's use of the squad, which in recent weeks has become definitely a topic of debate, but it's something that we've been talking about on my channel since the start of the season, really, and being that potentially an area that he could improve how he manages and uses the squad. It's very hard to, from an outside point of view, to look in and criticize that because there's so many intangibles, right, that we're not quite sure of. Like just take the Man City game, for example, when there was a big sort of debate post-match of whether in the second half, should we have stepped on the gas a bit more? But just looking in at things, not even from a mentality point of view, I think what I eventually took from the game, and it took me some time to sort it out in my head, but the players, as we saw against Luton last night, some of them are so clearly so fatigued. We also didn't have our big decisive weapons available for the full portion of the game, and that certainly impacted Arteta's game plan. And I've spoken about it, how it certainly wasn't his initial intention to go into Manchester City and have 28% of the ball.
Fact.
But you have to adapt to certain points in the game, and that's sort of just taking it the wind out of our sails there. But yeah, I think we've been the best side in the league, to cut it short, since about November, and that's coincided with Ødegaard's change in role, giving Saka more space, a return to our sort of man-to-man pressing schemes off the ball, out of possession dominance. But it's a very, very close run thing at the moment.
I think you're bang on the money. And I think, one thing that goes under the radar, in my opinion, is last season we kind of played with a swagger. We played attractive football, not exactly to the standard of, the early days of the Emirates, but definitely under Mikel Arteta and definitely post Wenger, the most exciting football. I think, although at the start of the season, I think we took a while to hit our optimum in terms of on the eye versus what the stats were telling us. I think we've married that with our defensive performance. And I think, defense wins titles. We've improved it tenfold, whether it's our pressing, going man to man, the areas we take up, just the whole ethos around defending.
Yeah.
So for me, it didn't surprise me that we kind of parked the bus against Manchester City. I don't have a criticism with that because you need to be able to do that. Yeah. I don't think that was the game plan, as you said. Odegaard, Saliba, and Arteta have kind of reflected that. And I guess for us in games like that, the next step is to know first to take the small chances we get, but kind of when to stick or twist sort of thing. But I'm sure you've seen it. The whole rhetoric and the comment is, people probably expected us to get battered and laugh at us and whatnot. Now we weren't entertaining and things like that. Me personally, I don't think me or any Arsenal fan really cares because we left with something. But what have you made around the rhetoric with that we parked the bus and we weren't excited and we were almost cowardly to some, allegedly?
Yeah, I mean, to levy some of the words that have been leveled at Arsenal and sort of cowardice, shyness, being within our shells, I think is totally unfair. Even if some people want to criticize and said we should have go for the win, I think cowardice is completely the wrong word because that totally misinterprets, I think, the changes in dynamics and build-up structure that Pep made that really threw us off course. How we really were going into the game with a couple of key decisive weapons that, as I've touched on, were unavailable. And we're going to the Etihad, where Manchester City, it's been 3 years since they haven't scored a goal before the game against us at the Etihad. They're unbeaten in however long. And I think the biggest thing that I said in my breakdown of the video was from a mentality point of view, and obviously the concentration and the maturation of the squad, I think in recent weeks emotionally has been absolutely key. And I think Man City really capped that off. But also on the flip side of that, I think we have to remember, and it's something that hasn't really been brought up, we have to remember that this torrid recent history that Arsenal have at the Etihad, 12 or 13, repeated losses.
It's a horrible record.
Sort of Cazorla and Giroud double in 2015-16, when we won there, is that Arteta is part of that recent history too. He's part of the playing side that has been to the Etihad and been bodied. And it's a difficult mental hurdle for Arsenal to get over. And I think if you take things in the larger picture now, which is look at the big game flexibility that Arsenal have. You have the ability to, yes, soak up a lot of pressure, but reduce Man City to next to nothing, which with some of just taking De Bruyne, for example, who is arguably the best killer of a low block in Premier League history. If you take that approach, sitting deep against City, if you take sort of the high press suffocation and man-to-man killing that we had against Liverpool at the Emirates, and also how good we were then showing our ascendancy in settled play and positional play, and how we're a level above Liverpool on that front, then if you take it even further back and go to Anfield, where it's really just blow for blow, transition for transition against Liverpool, who are the heavy metal football artists, you would say. And we were able to, like I said, go blow for blow against them. And I think ultimately it all comes back to that first game against Man City, when it's a balance for Arsenal, like Rob Edwards said yesterday, where that home game, that 1-0 win against Man City at the Emirates, where we had more of the ball. Remember, this is an Arsenal side that have had last season in the 3-1 loss at the Emirates against Pep Guardiola. We lost 3-1, but we had 64% of the ball, which is the highest possession suffered Guardiola has had in his career. So there's lots of different ways. And I think it summarizes in this Arteta sort of big game flexibility, right? And how we can go to the Emirates and set the sort of hardest mid-block you can play against, that hybrid press, which is suffocating against man-to-man, but also can sit deep in a mid to low block, or you can sort of keep switching. And that big game flexibility, I think, for Arteta, we've seen 4 games against Man City and Liverpool this year, and in every single game there's been a different approach that has been, some would say, equally as effective. And I think that's a great way to really sum up the game against Man City, even if I can sympathise with some people wanting to sort of make that Etihad away result one of the famous results that you sort of normally say cap off a league win, those big sort of away wins that league winners have. But I think all in all, you're only going to know, aren't you, when hindsight's in action. And for the game state and how we were as a team on the day, I think we can't be too dissatisfied with what we came away with, given the history as well.
I don't think you have said anything wrong. I don't think we can be too dissatisfied. I get it. You know, we are a new look Arsenal. In many ways, it did feel winnable. In many ways, you know, the half chances, maybe with, you know, I think Havertz had one, Gabriel Jesus had a few. I think it will be summed up with probably a match of the day with Trossard's decision making. Had we have, you know, they worked out, we would have won. It would have been a famous win. And I guess the next step is to take what we've been doing in these big games and rock up at Anfield or the Etihad and get wins. But as they say, if you can't win, don't lose. Had we have lost, that would have been catastrophic psychologically and in terms of results, and it probably would have given City a boost. You're bang on the money. You know, you look at Klopp and Pep, with the greatest of respect to Mikel Arteta, they've been here before. Arsenal was still on an upwards journey and an upwards trajectory, and Mikel Arteta is the same. So I don't have any complaints, really and truly. And it's like you said there, to know that we can kind of have a plan B and have that humbleness to say, wow, this isn't what we want to do. We can healthily respect the opposition. I know it doesn't mean much, but that tells me we can go to the Etihad at Anfield and things like that and do that again. Or if we advance in the Champions League, we can do things. How have you seen a change in Mikel Arteta this season versus last then?
This season, I think the big discourse earlier on was the return or sort of the emergence of a much more patient approach for Arsenal. And certainly some of that had to do with trying to preserve the squad and manage the squad for this sort of end of season push, where obviously we're fighting on multiple fronts now in the biggest of occasions. I think for Arteta, the thing that gets me so excited, right, about Mikel is that not even just every season, but every sort of 4 or 5 months under Mikel, we've seen not an evolution, but sort of the next phase of his tactical regimes and tactical plans. And there's been a development, a clear progression, and also chronology that you can sort of map out and see his thought process laid out across the course of the season. I think tactically he's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, to say as well that a lot of his plans in pre-season this year were blown up sort of with the increasing unavailability of Partey, but probably even more important was the ACL injury to Jurrien Timber, right?
Yep.
Just 27 minutes into the game against Nottingham Forest. And it's, I mean, people who watch my channel would know I'm a massive fan of Jurrien, and they will ask sort of why, when we've seen 27 minutes of him in the Premier League and a handful of games in pre-season. But when you buy such a unique player for also a very unique set, really. Yeah, exactly, for a very unique set of roles for this Arsenal side as well, alongside Partey's injury, it put a lot of Arteta's initial plans down the drain. Being able to sort of play, obviously, with not just Martin Odegaard, but 2 other auxiliary controllers in Partey and Rice. Obviously, it's taken time for Jorginho to come into the team, but for the whole first half of the season, he was playing with 1 hip, essentially. So the Partey injury has been difficult. But if we look at the start of the season, there were so many different tactical iterations of Arsenal. And my big thing that I covered a lot was unpredictability. I mean, just to take Jurrien Timber in isolation, there's so many systems, of course, that he allows us, but not just being able to play as an outside centre-back or invert from full-back on the left or right side, but it's his ability to step up into midfield, occupy often the left centre mid role in between the lines, or even on the last line as a 5th or 6th man.
That means our attackers can be even further forward up that field as well.
Exactly.
And go unmarked. It's crazy.
And as I was saying, with the sort of slow return to our man-to-man suffocation this season, Timber would have allowed that, of course, a lot earlier by not having to at times hide players in the press. You know, Arteta's actually done that really cleverly with, I think, Jorginho when he's played with Rice, and not always using Jorginho sort of in between the lines. So in our hybrid zone, often we set up in a 4-1-4-1. Last season, Partey was that holding midfielder 6 in between the lines. And all in order to stop Jorginho sort of being exposed and covering more space than he can in that 1 in the midfield, he's used Rice there in the 6 and Jorginho uniquely as sort of this left 8 out of position. And then when Ødegaard joins the front 2 to trigger our man-to-man press, Rice can step up and is essentially doing 2 jobs at once, and you're specialising Jorginho.
Saw this against City as well, to echo your points that you're making.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing as well that it's exciting about Mikel is that to some extent he got it wrong at the start of the season with how he was using essentially a 2 shadow striker system behind the centre forward with Havertz in the left shadow striker, which absolutely can work. But it was Martin Ødegaard as that right shadow striker essentially that was sort of utilising him solely as a box crasher instead of that all-phase role, giving Rice sort of a lot of heavy lifting to do and not quite the fullback depth or auxiliary controller depth that we have through various injuries. And part of the reason I think for that was to have Arsenal as a team experiment with attacking in different modes. I call it the big space setup on my channel, to get more comfortable with attacking bigger spaces and being more devastating, not having to build our way through the thirds, sort of in that almost mesmeric 1-touch, 2-touch pass and move rotation dominant play, which we saw in the 22-23 season and actually against Luton last night. And that could coincide with sort of a return to the last season's back 5 against Luton last night. But he sort of saw that and experimented with different modes of attacking. I think that's really helped us in the long run, actually. But now we've returned to a more balanced, I think, system, and one that could have been done much earlier with Jurrien Timber's injury. I think we would have seen a lot more, for example, of Kai Havertz as sort of the tip of a diamond, playing that sort of Ram Deuter type role that he excels at, and also sort of a 3-diamond 3 shape with Timber on the left or right of that diamond. So there's lots of different iterations of Arsenal that I think are still whirring in Mikel Arteta's head, and that's why I completely believe him when he said we're not even close to phase 5 of his plan yet. You have a team that you're potentially so complete as we are now, but like I can't even begin to emphasize how many more levels we have to go up, not just in terms of how we set up on the pitch, but also, of course, players that we have to target in the transfer market as well.
I think you're bang on the money, man. And that's the one thing I like. I know the journey, you know, they say in life you have to love the process or the journey more than actually the destination. I don't quite agree with that because there's nothing better than success and definitely winning the Premier Champs. But you truly have to. I think we've improved a lot. And one thing I have liked is year by year, game by game, we are improving. If I had to, without talking about statistics, if I had to say the one thing I like the most about our players, it would be resilience, and it would be people want to take responsibility on their shoulders. Like there's been times where where we've conceded or mistakes have happened. And in previous years, like for instance, Ramsdale against Brentford, and many years ago, we lose that game. Ramsdale's the poster boy. Now we've made it happen, and we can't deny the obvious. He made a mistake, but we got 3 points, and we're not bullied anymore. And I think there's more of a belief, and I think it doesn't matter how great the players are technically, what Arteta has in terms of his ideas, he's got to be able to transmit that, and the players have got to be able to believe in it, even if they can't necessarily see why he's asking you to do that. So I really like the way we're moving. As I said, and as you kind of said, I think the next steps are probably winning at Anfield, winning at the Etihad, not shooting ourselves in the foot in smaller games, which has been the case this season because we've been great against the top 6, probably more profiles in terms of recruitment and just marrying the depth. I kind of want to stick on stuff here because you mentioned Timber, and I want to speak about Benjamin White. But before any of that, who do you think has the hardest roles in this Arsenal team? Because I think everyone's role is difficult. For me personally, I would say probably Benjamin White and Martin Ødegaard.
Yeah, I mean, to start with Ben White, I don't think you could go wrong with saying he has the hardest role. I think the hardest part, arguably, of White's role is just how he's able to stay fit and stay available for the whole season. I mean, if you look, we're talking about heavy lifting, what he has to do now in terms of facilitating and making that right-hand side for us really, really key. Obviously, we've talked about the changes in dynamics and how it's given Saka more space, but Ben White being able to overlap and add sort of actually much needed dynamism from the flanks that Ødegaard can't provide from interior. Havertz isn't that type of player. He's more associative. Smith Rowe's been out the team. Timber's been injured. Zinchenko sort of lost that buzz after his surgery. It's really key that Ben White can provide that and allow Saka to move infield into the half space where he's probably from that sort of right interior position, arguably the best in the world, alongside players like Phil Foden in that sort of category of players. It's key that White does that, and we've seen in recent weeks also him inverting into midfield alongside Declan Rice and having a really fluid relationship then with Martin Ødegaard of when to interchange, then when to become that sort of sixth man or fifth man on the outside, providing our width. And I mean, against Man City, he was obviously our outlet. Without Martinelli, we didn't have that raw runner type outlet to get us in behind. So it was often White starting, running from deep, not even charging down sort of...
First 20 minutes, he looked like our attacking outlet, to be fair.
Exactly.
We put a couple balls in.
And it was not just down sort of the sideline, but also in that half space role as well. So he's taken up lots of different pockets, lots of different positions. And I think as well that greater emphasis of him being in central areas can really unlock something that I really want Arsenal to focus on. And I'm sure Mikel Arteta knows from watching Ben White and signing him nominally as a centre-back, and that is his passing range. Like he's got such a ability to be almost like a quarterback for Arsenal. And
so good he doesn't need to watch football, man.
Exactly. And I just think it's when he's doing all of this with, of course, being integral in our rest defence as well, just the sheer amount of legs that he has to do, being such a clever footballer, a master of the dark arts as well. I completely agree with you by saying he's one of the hardest roles in the Arsenal team. Of course, there is a lot of emphasis, like you said, on Ødegaard, sort of dictating play much more and being sort of our key progressor of the ball. If you look at sort of progression stats and through balls, creative numbers, he's up there in the upper echelons of Europe. And that is, saying all of that without playing the amount of minutes as the other two, which are the Cruces, the Xhakas, the Rodris, in that deeper role. He's been higher for 3-4 months of the season. So they're quite staggering numbers. So he's definitely he's leading our attack forward at times. But having said that, it's one of those where if we have, like Arsenal do, a lot of ability now with players coming back to become that sort of secondary controller alongside Rice, it gets to a point where at times Ødegaard, even if we haven't seen it for the last few months, is probably allowed more of an off day than we can think of. And it probably links to maybe a further evolution in his role, which has been discussed a lot about, is maybe him having to move at some point to the left-hand side of central.
I was just about to ask you that left thing.
And it's, I mean, we can get onto it now, to be honest, because...
Yeah, man, I want your thoughts on that, man.
Yeah, it's... I've talked about it quite a lot, and why, although it maybe should happen, it won't. Obviously, he's so integral out of possession for Arsenal and how he leads the press and his pressing angles from the right-hand side. I think out of possession as well, him, as soon as you move him to that left centre mid, it becomes more about how competent he is in duels.
Probably need someone to fill that void that he would leave of equal importance as well in the
exactly.
10th,
And we've seen against Luton twice this year, actually, him struggling in the duel against Ross Barkley. And it's something like he's relentless, right? He is relentless. He's got an absolute engine on him and he carries the team forward. And I would really like to see him in sort of a quasi left 8 role, whatever you want to call it, left centre mid, whatever. Because when he's given more freedom, like he was against Luton last night, when there's lots of rotations happening alongside him, when he can sort of has that all phase centre mid role, which he isn't really allowed as much when Jorginho plays. It's more of an out and out number 10 or shadow striker again. And part of that is because a more mobile option than Jorginho would allow us to be a bit more fluid in that, right? But when he's allowed to drift like he was, even though he was normally our right interior against Luton, when he drifted centrally, and then also when he drifted further across to the left, you just see how much more, in a way, penetrative he becomes with his passes, right? Because the way Ødegaard receives a pass,
It's on his
is
left-hand
always,
side.
and it's always his body angles are very closed off. So sometimes it's not conducive to the most quick shuttling of the ball, playing it to White or Saka. The way he's closed off when he receives the ball and his body angles, it makes him much more vertical in his temperament, basically, from the left centre mid. And that's when you start to see the assists for Martinelli against Brighton, the first time ball down the left-hand half space. That's when sort of the one thing you'd say that he lacks in his passing is that big switch of play, that big range finder. And from the left, this is so much more likely to happen. He becomes so much more vertical, like I was saying, in his temperament. He becomes actually much more efficient on the ball. It's sort of, the way I see it is that on the right, he isn't just the dictator of attacks. He also has to be a moving part and at times provide the width and penetrative under or overlaps for Bukayo Saka. And to put it simply, that's not his game at all. And if you're talking about a switch from right to left, it's probably quite slight in terms of what it would actually change in terms of results.
You lose that relationship to Iligi on the right hand side.
Yeah, and it's probably quite negligible in what it would change results and performances wise. But as a left footer in that left centre mid, he becomes an anchor on that left hand side. There's moving parts around him now, and it's much better when he has Martinelli and that runner to hit in the left wing. But as we saw against Luton, you can sort of make up for it when he drifts there, when you have sort of the final third combination and rotation play of Smith Rowe, Trossard and Havertz, all in that little triangle of three ahead of him. It makes up when you're playing a much deeper defence. Obviously, Luton, they go man-to-man from goal kicks, but when you're playing a much deeper defence with not as much space in behind, it doesn't really matter as much. But look, I'm a big fan of Ødegaard moving to the left centre mid role. I don't think it will happen, to be honest. Certainly not anything in the near future. And I think a lot of it is what type of other profile we sign in the transfer window. Can we find another centre mid to not just replace Partey's sort of passing ability and Jorginho's passing ability, but also to give us a much needed update in our athleticism in the midfield? Because if we can start to carry, if you make Ødegaard the least physical player in our midfield, you're doing something right. When you sort of look how key he is out of possession, how he triggers the switch from our zone to a man-man. It's definitely something to look at, and I think he becomes much more efficient in how he uses the ball on the left. But it's one of the things actually I'm a bit stumped on, to be honest, with Arteta. I don't know if he's going to do that or not, because Ødegaard is still excelling right now in this role.
I think you're right, man. And the truth is, nobody knows, because we've seen us, have organic sort of fullbacks under Mikel Arteta when it was Tierney whipping those balls in. Obviously, last season and this year, it's more inverted. And like you said, unfortunately, Timber's injured, but you kind of saw with Tomiyasu's form in the final third before he got that first injury and Timber's introduction, kind of how that fullback role is evolving. Benjamin White of recent as well. I mean, the more players that can play different roles and do different things, we've got more options. Variety is the spice of life. I do think Ødegaard will do that at some point in his Arsenal career and can do it, but I just think you need to get someone that can kind of play to his level, because I actually feel what you would rob Ødegaard of, probably linking up with Benjamin White, Saka, in and around on a consistent basis, the edge of the opposition's area. He's not Santi Cazorla, but in a sense, I see him being a Santi Cazorla in that in terms of build-up, we'd be a lot more creative. And on the left-hand side, we probably have a bit of teething problem, so that could be something Ødegaard could address, but I'm happy where he is at the moment. What do you make of Kai Havertz? Appreciate you in the circle, because this is a great question. Question for you. If we sign a killer striker, what is the future for Kai Havertz? Can he get a start now? For me, I think we need to move away from starters and focus on starters and impactors and game states and all the things Mikel Arteta preaches about. But if we go away from the tactical sort of stuff, and I can't rule out Kai Havertz looking comfortable in the 8, but he's really thriving as a striker. If we sign a marquee striker, we sign a midfielder, on paper, if you're asking me to name Arsenal's strongest team, I don't think that would have Kai Havertz. But within the squad, kind of keeping up the words I've been saying, he's a unicorn. And I do think even if he's not in the starting lineup, mainly against the top 6 clashes, which he's done, that's where you probably see Kai Havertz randomly start. But where would you be at with that?
Yeah, I mean, the two roles that I outlined as soon as we signed for Havertz was either sort of that Romdeuter type figure, which is either sort of the top of the diamond, or as he was sort of in that shadow striker role, although with better dynamics around him, or nominally, as I saw him as that centre forward. I think there still is a really big ceiling for Havertz in terms of becoming that out and out box dominator, in terms of aerially and on the ground. There's sort of ways that he needs to work on the touch that prepares his shot a lot. But I think you can't, as soon as just him as a presence alone generates so much for us.
Helps us so much defensively.
Obviously, we've spoke about him as an outlet and how that sort of gives us something that we didn't last season. We didn't have a back to goal outlet who can also carry us up the pitch from centre forward in transition, because we found it really difficult last year to play over man-to-man presses. He gives us the ability to not just do that, but do that to such a tremendous standard. There's, we just take this season, that performance against Konate at the Emirates. I haven't seen anyone give Konate such a difficult time in the air ever. And I think the only way to improve on Arsenal's forward options, when you put them as an aggregate, as Havertz, as Jesus, as Trossard, as Nketiah, is with that superstar player. And the camp I'm in at the moment is that I would go into the summer window. I'd rather prioritise a marquee central midfielder.
Thank you.
And also a player to give us much needed legs and athleticism in the midfield, to sort of make us a team that there isn't an athletic or physical weak spot on the whole team. I would prioritise something like an Onana plus someone else. That's where my head is at the moment. But obviously lots can change. But I think we should wait until a proper opportunity arises for a marquee forward, because whether it's costs that are going up and going down, or whether it's actual availability, I think it's a little bit ambiguous, the striker market right now. And I think, to be honest, bigger issues is getting midfield depth in, especially with Partey and Jorginho. They could quite easily both have left.
Their future's up in there, and it will always be subject to debate. They don't provide longevity either. When you look at the other areas of our field, we have that. And Mikel Arteta and Edu, I say it all the time, you two were midfielders. So that's kind of the one area I'd love to be addressed. I'm with you. I would love two central midfielders. Personally, I'm of the belief now that we'll get Jorginho might stay. We'll get another one. I don't know if Thomas Partey will stay, but if I take his comments for gospel based on what he said 24 hours ago, it's probably a bit of political PR, but he could stay. Do I see Arteta kind of doing that? Maybe, because there's been points where we've been linked with a lot of central midfielders and it hasn't quite happened. But I would like to see midfield be addressed. In an ideal world, I'd love two midfielders. I'd love a striker. I'd love a winger. But as you said, the striker market is very ambiguous. And I do think one thing that goes over a lot of people's head is, of course, we need a striker that could get goals. It'd be lovely. Again, when you look at the half chances with City towards the tail end of last year, where I actually feel we was playing well, but psychologically struggling in front of goal. If we had a bagsman or a goal scorer, a natural goal scorer, we turn some of those defeats or draws into victories. And obviously there's more points on the board. But I think one thing that goes beyond a lot of Arsenal fans' heads is it's all the other aspects, because if goals are one thing, but if needing to score goals was the prerequisite to stay there, you wouldn't see Kai Havertz and Nketiah, Jesus and Trossard, because they're not clinical per se. So I think it's the profile. And of course, as you know yourself, being linked and actually signing players, we don't know who, because we're not flies on the wall. And we'll get onto it in a bit. But where you look at Isaac, Tony, Osimhen, Sesko, they're all and many more, they're all likable players, and they do have some similarities. But there's all a lot of differences. So until Mikel Arteta was to sit next to me like you are in this video and say exactly what he would like, I don't know. Because as you know yourself, it's very different being linked with a player and who we're actually going to get. And I do think we have to understand multifunctionalness. Like, I wouldn't rule out, I don't think it will be, but I wouldn't rule out someone of the Trossard ilk. And what I mean by that is someone that can play across the front three, that carries a strong catalogue of goals, that adds to what we come into. And I do think we need some explosiveness from wide areas. I think when you look at Rafinha, Pedro, and who's the other one? There's another one, Mudryk, those failed pursuits. It seems like Mikel Arteta is aware that he would like that, whether that's to stretch defenses off the bench or have another option. So as it goes back to what you said, there's many gears to go up. I want to stick on defense for a sec, yeah. how good do you think Gabriel and a bit of 3 questions in one? How good have they been as a duo? Who do you think's been the better one? And how good do you think they could be?
Yeah, I mean the Saliba versus Gabriel debate. I mean, it is an interesting debate, but the way I see it is the exact same way that I see debates, for example, around Van Dijk and Konate. By virtue of defending the centre more, which is what Saliba does in our system as a central centre back, you're more valuable as a player. But I think, having said that, and I tweeted it yesterday, Gabriel against Luton yesterday was
Quality.
like the level of concentration that he showed. And again, we talked about it earlier, but that emotional maturation of him.
He typifies that.
Yeah, the way he took responsibility against Luton yesterday. And that concentration aspect is absolutely key. I mean, he is as good as it gets as that, the way he sort of shuttles his legs so close to the ground. It gives him that 1v1 ability. Not really when we've seen him stretched up against the byline more or at the sideline more as a left back, but as that final blockade and wall of defence. 1v1 abilities does not get much better.
His role's quite complicated in the Arsenal side set up as well, if I'm honest.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of actually, in terms of how high Gabriel can get as a player, and if he can reach the levels of William Saliba, a lot of it will be down to whether he can actually probably play left back for us. You see the sort of suppleness that a Nathan Ake operates for Man City, or even a Josko Gvardiol now. Different type of players, but I think
once upon a time Laporte as well.
If he can begin to fill that role, you won't get situations like we had at the start of the season where we inverted from the right instead, so everyone shifted across. One more, it was Partey from right back, not Zinchenko from left back. So suddenly our left centre back would become the left back in a back four. And that was the reason why Gabriel didn't play the first 3-4, whatever games it was. And I think if he can do that, that just adds another 10-20 million onto his value. I think at the moment he's, in terms of form-wise, he's probably the best Arsenal defender. But I think you can't compare him to what Saliba does, who's the technical leader of our back line, who defends the channels as well like a monster. So cool, so composed.
It's like fire and ice.
Exactly. And that's what all the best centre-back partnerships have done, right?
Facts.
And the way, and I think Gabriel, like you said, he exemplifies sort of that emotional evolution of Arsenal, particularly this season, and how they mature as a squad.
Probably I don't know if there was head against Haaland a few years ago, and now
exactly. And I don't know if you have asked one more question in that little snippet that I've missed out.
Who do you think's been better this season?
Saliba.
Do you know what? Yeah, I actually think it's been Gabriel. I think Saliba is a lot more gracious and things, but I think, and again, it's not a slight on Saliba or Gabriel. It's like what Inner Circle's saying here. It's a pleasure to have a great team and great players and almost in-house debates. I do feel though Gabriel has, and they help each other and get each other out. I do think Gabriel's been a bit more mature. I think he's relished that kind of big brother role, and I think that's kind of helped him. And I look back like Porto at home, for example, even in the beginning of the game at City, I think there's times where Saliba, rare, but Saliba's shown that he's an early 20-year-old centre-half. But it's a great conversation to have. Obviously, Gabriel's the aggressor. Saliba mops up. Saliba allows him to be gracious, and they both are monsters. I think Saliba's ceiling's higher. I think Saliba is better. I prefer proactive defenders. I prefer to watch someone like Gabriel because they're hands-on. It's great to watch. But I like if someone made a last-ditch slide tackle, for example, right? That would be great. That would be on YouTube, and I like that. But I would rather someone what's like Saliba in that he's read the situation. Don't need to make that. He's intercepted. It's not going to sell any stories. It's not going to be on Match of the Day, but it's amazing. I think both of them have shouts to be player of the season. I think you could throw Benjamin White and Declan Rice into that. And I think it's lovely to say because them names I said there, it typifies how much we've improved defensively. There has to be a correlation between over the last, I say 3 years, because I think the inroads were there when we missed out on top 4 to Spurs, but the personnel wasn't. The last 2 years, we've really come up a tenfold. And that's why I think, and I'm not saying like Arsenal the biggest and baddest team in the world, but one thing I've also liked when we have drop points, it's not been because we've been battered or outplayed. I would say, to be fair to you, West Ham away in the League Cup and Fulham away, I think we was terrible. But other than that, we've shot ourselves in the foot against West Ham at the Emirates, not putting the ball in the back of the net, definitely against Chelsea and Spurs. So it's lovely to see, and it's lovely to have these debates. And for me as well, I know typically Saka makes the difference, but there's times where, not that he hasn't had to turn up, but we're getting results or making the difference without him scoring or doing something. 9 times out of 10 at Arsenal, we was living or dying by what these players are doing. What did you make of Thomas Partey's return against City, and obviously his first start in a really long time against Luton? Do you think like he's ready to show his quality now, make the difference for us?
I mean, he is, I can't put it lightly enough, he is so important, just having him fit and available for the rest of the season. Another injury would be brutal, not just for him, but for us as a squad. Of course, what he gives us on the ball is unquestionable, as he's probably the most proactive and best player we have in the squad in terms of playing those line splitters. And that's also imperative into accessing sort of a freer Martin Ødegaard higher up and in different channels of the pitch. A lot is said now about his athleticism and how he didn't quite look. He looks like he's lost it on the cameo against Man City and against Luton. What I will say that he hasn't been that athletic Thomas Partey, that octopus that we signed for probably a year and a half now. He lost that physical sort of edge, marginal gain a long time ago. And he's good now, but he's by no means elite in what he was. And it's part of the reason why we need to sort of look in the window of not just replacing his passing, but his physical edge. But he's so important for us. He obviously is a bigger upgrade mobility-wise than Jorginho. But yeah, on the ball gives us such an edge. And he's one of the players as well that, in terms of his tendencies, which is slightly more progressive and vertical than retentive, which is probably what the modern day 6 is sort of known for now. But in terms of, I think Arsenal's biggest problem, or not biggest problem, one of our problems against Man City was lacking that Martinelli figure to not just help us in transitions, but to create transitional moments within themselves and carry us up the pitch with them.
And allow Odegaard to stay between the lines a bit more, I'd say, as well. With
and Partey is another way of accessing them. But I think he's imperative, to be honest, staying fit, because it's not just about having another body in there, but it's having his sort of breaker qualities in the centre of the pitch. So yeah, he needs to stay fit, and I think we've sort of Arteta and Edu have been, they've paid the price for backing his fitness. I think at the start of this season, I think they've paid the price for it, but he's imperative that he stays fit now. Absolutely.
It's a weird one because, like, I do think there's a correlation with Thomas Partey being fit for, I think, 33 games in the Premier League, 14 all comps last season, and our improvement. But at the same time, was that an anomaly, or was that something else we was or wasn't doing? And it's annoying because, I know you can't always take a manager's word for it, but anytime he's able to speak about Partey, he waxes lyrical. I would like to have seen, and I hope to see what's left of this season, with the greatest of respect to Jorginho and obviously Smith Rowe's cameo against Luton. I would love to see Declan Rice, Partey, and obviously Odegaard. I think that has the perfect balance of line splitters, physicality. I think Partey could have that trust if he ventures forward, that Rice will be there. Rice the same. You've got Odegaard, who you're looking at him, he's not the most physical figures, but the metrics all display what he does in that regard. I wanted to ask you as well, who would be it's only April, I know the season's almost done, but who would be your most improved player of the season, and who would be your player of the season currently?
I'll start with most improved. I think maybe you could say Ødegaard, but that's more not because of his qualities as a player, but him as a role check, how he's changed and evolved his role. I think Havertz is another massive contender for most improved player. But then again, a lot of his management in the early season was having to fill a role as the left interior for us when we didn't have the bodies in midfield. And like I said, we were experimenting with new attacking dynamics. I think Jakub Kivior is another one.
I was going to say him definitely for most improved.
In recent weeks, he's been near flawless. And I think the way I see Kivior is that he's clearly still adapting to playing so wide on the pitch. Because when he played at Spezia and when he was most comfortable playing for Arsenal last season in the centre of our back three, it really showed how comfortable he was on the ball and how composed he was. I think at times he doesn't lose concentration, but sort of that first touch from left back, sort of he forgets his angles and where he is on the pitch, I think, at times, and that can allow him to be pressed a bit more easily. But I think his brains and how quick he is as well he's never going to be a player that can dominate those wide 1v1 duels, but he
needs to improve at that.
But he can definitely navigate them, as we've seen with how clever he is. I think his body positions could improve, but he's got the brains and he's got the pace to navigate. So he's another figure. Trying to think if there's anyone more. I think those three are definitely up there. For player of the season, I think Saka again, Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard, or any of the defensive axis.
Any of the linchpins as well in our team could get it, to be fair.
Exactly. It's been a real team effort.
Keyword team. Facts.
Yeah, exactly. But I think in terms of just seeing the question at the bottom there, in terms of important players, and it goes back a little bit to the Gabriel and Saliba debate. If Saliba or let's say if Saliba got injured, just as he did last season, you'd completely see the difference to how we play and how we defend as a squad. Gabriel is, this is again no shade to him, it's just how he's used and his value as us in a team. He is slightly more replaceable. So important players would, of course, be Declan Rice or probably William Saliba. Any of those two, I think it's the drop-off is immeasurable if either of those two were to get injured, as any top side would struggle with, as City have with Rodri, for example.
Most important player? It's difficult because there's all different. It's almost like you've got an 11 team and then you've got 3 different sub-teams, and it's like everything intercepts and interjects, and then you've got different relationships on the right-hand side with the centre-backs and the full-backs without a full-back. Like Benjamin White ties into the midfield. It's quite intricate what Arteta does. So most important is very difficult. But I would say, like you said, I think you can't negate Saliba. I think on everything demanded of him, I'd say Gabriel has a shout. I think of recent Kai Havertz. I'm actually going to say it's between Benjamin White and Martin Odegaard. I know we've got people that can fill into these positions, but I think very few players typify what Mikel Arteta, has been doing at this club than Odegaard. And I think very few players kind of project the movement we've been on, really and truly, because everyone could see he was a talented player when we signed him in January, but eyebrows were raised by me included when he was given the captaincy and everything he's doing. So I would say Martin Odegaard, because he's almost like a lieutenant of Mikel Arteta's on the pitch. You see him doing that and all the hand signs and whatnot. So I'd say him. Most improved, I would have to give it to Kirill. I think it's a bit unfair because not to Kirill, but I think Gabriel's improved. I think Saliba has improved. I think Benjamin White has improved. I think a lot of people have improved. But you lot were, it's not that Kirill's not good, but you lot were good and quite highly favoured already. So most improved Kirill, you've gone from being on the peripheral things to, at the moment, first choice left back. Whether that will be the case with what we see with the games left is another thing. Player of the season so far, there's a lot. I'll give it to Gabriel, man, because I just feel it's or Benjamin White between the two at this moment, because I feel obviously football is geared towards the attackers. They're the poster boys and things, but defense wins titles, and I don't feel them to necessarily get the flowers they deserve. But it's a fantastic debate. If Mikel Arteta never achieves anything at this football club, look at the conversations we're now starting to have. So it's fair to say he's doing all right. There's another question on screen, and I think this is interesting. Subject, shout out to yourself in a circle. Which squad players will be sold / moved on in the summer? Actually, not who should go. So I think he means who we probably think are going to be moved on. From what? Tierney, days look numbered. Unfortunately, Ramsdale, Lokonga. Trying to think of people in and around the first team. You'd imagine Eddie Nketiah, Reece Nelson, Smith Rowe's futures will be subject to debate purely because they can raise funds. At the starting 11, I don't know if there'll be an offer for Zinchenko if he could move on. I think people are quite harsh to Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko. They're still valued squad players, but naturally it feels like, not that the system or the team's lost them, but, you know, it's not like it's only their roles in the team now, like there's others. So I'm not too sure. You got any suggestions? I'm not.
I think it's almost guaranteed that one of Partey or Jorginho will move on. I think that's I think that's almost guaranteed. I think there's a real need for, in every sense of the phrase, fresh legs in the midfield.
Yeah, facts.
And I think one of them will move on. And I think the depth we have across the front line that sort of this season certainly hasn't been utilised as sort of maybe as flexibly as possibly could. I think so. Yeah, one of Reece, one of Eddie could definitely be moved on. I think Eddie is the biggest sellable asset that we have. So that from a financial point of view, it makes a lot more sense. And I'm outspoken. I'm a really big fan of Nketiah, and I think if you get him moving to a sort of 5th to 10th place,
it'll show his quality, man. Bit like Welbeck at Brighton.
Absolutely, and I think, my thing is I love relentless strikers, and I think he's a brilliant channel runner despite not having out and out pace. When he's in and around the box, when he gets the balls, he creates separation really well. He dominates his chances. I think he's much more clinical finisher than people give him credit for. And it's the type of role that needs to be simplified with Eddie. I think he's asked at times to do quite a lot in the Arsenal.
Yeah, this striker role is just a bit too intricate for him. If I'm honest, he's more of a throwback, traditional kind of, not Jermaine Defoe, but Jermaine Defoe-y kind of striker rather than this multifunctional guy that the others are providing.
But I think there's a real big asset in him in terms of financial. If we sort of play our cards right, like we are looking like we are doing a bit more with Eddie nowadays. Lokonga again is like you touched on. It's been frustrating that he's been injured for Luton recently because he was in a real good patch of form.
Really finding his feet.
But the way our midfield will be the biggest body of change in the summer, that is absolutely for sure. And I think we could go into. We thought it was different this year with how we were setting up, with obviously the movements of Xhaka away and going slightly different dynamics. But I think it will be another big change again. In terms of personnel and who we see in the starting lineup. So yeah, I'd say one of Jorginho or Partey. In an ideal world, probably both, because this is probably the last year, or we've probably moved past the year that you can get a real good fee for Thomas Partey. That was probably last summer. And Jorginho, like has been mentioned, may be Spain bound or back to Italy. And yeah, I think Kieran Tierney, unfortunately, looks like another set one to
just a casualty of the system advancing. It's just, you can't do it, Tierney.
And one player we haven't talked about who's on 90 odd grand a week is Cedric. He will.
Oh yeah, tells you everything. He's just gone under the radar. He's living his best life, man. Him and Scott Carson got the best gigs in football right now.
Yeah, I don't blame you for forgetting him. We've probably forgotten someone else as well. But there will be a lot of movement at Arsenal this summer. It will be a busy window.
I'm definitely with you. I'm going to stick a pin in the summer because I've got some things to kind of close up to go over with you. I wanted to cover this question. Geeks, I appreciate you because you've been commenting in the live chat quite frequently. Question for you both. Your top 3 ones to watch Arsenal youth who will break through. Who you got?
I don't know if... I don't think Nwaneri counts, so I'm not going to because I think...
he definitely counts.
Yeah, well, we'll add him as one then because I think obviously 17-year-old, but if he didn't quite have who he had in the squad ahead of him, of course, we've got Ødegaard, we've got Vieira, we've got Smith Rowe. There's so many interiors of a real good level ahead of him in the squad. And I think if that wasn't the case, sort of his, I guess, in his age category, that's the same level as him, is someone like Zaire Emery at PSG. I think you would have otherwise been seeing him genuinely have minutes along, like, the same as Emery at PSG. That's how good the kid is. I think hopefully there's a place for him to get some minutes before the end of the season. If not, he'll be promoted to the first team by the time next season comes around. That's for sure. Miles Lewis Skelly is another one, and it's an interesting one because he's another interior. At the moment, he's played a lot of his youth level minutes out wide. There's
rumours he could be converted to a left back even.
Exactly. I was just about to touch on that. So thank you for bringing it up because it's an easy, or not an easy way, because no route is easy, but it's an easier pathway for youngsters to develop into the side by moving them into, as has been mentioned with Lewis Skelly, as sort of an inverted fullback from left back. The way he drops his shoulder into midfield is very Rico Lewis-esque for Manchester City. And I think as he grows into his frame a bit more, he'll take on more and more responsibility. Can probably in his profile fill in as a number 6 or in a pivot at times. But I think, again, he'll be another sort of number 8 interior. That is that sort of Jack Wilshere presence in between the lines and that low centre of gravity, bob and weave. But yeah, inverted fullback could definitely be a way in for him.
I mean, for me, it's a technical one. I mean, Ethan, I think I think we really need to. His feet will be on the ground because he's just, he strikes me as that. And obviously, Arsenal won't tell you to count your chickens before they hatch. But I think fans, we have to let the man develop. We got to remember he's a 17-year-old young man. He's developing as a human being physically, let alone mentally, let alone the pace, because the technique's there, but it's the pace of the football now, and it's all about the tactics and being able to retain that. But you can't look beyond him. I think Miles Lewis Skelly, because of his mentality and his upbringing, I think he stands a very good chance. And he's 14 years of age, 14. So again, I stress to calm the hell down with him. But Max Dolman, I think there's something about him. I think him and Ethan within 5-6 years. Yeah, he's crazy. I do like Jose Dewberry and Walters. I think especially Walters, because I think at Arsenal, I think the next step for us is to produce academy players through our academy. I don't want to praise Chelsea, but you look at them generally, they've got, Reece James. It doesn't really matter what position they kind of come through. At Arsenal, it's kind of been geared towards the more attackers. I don't know if Jose Dewberry and Walters are going to stay. Walters obviously plays fullback. Jose Dewberry plays out wide. They've got 6 months left on their deal, nowhere near the first team. But I would have liked Walters purely because with a bit of experience, I think he can plug a gap. With the greatest of respect to him, he's obviously not the most glamorous. He's just like a steady Eddie of sorts. But sometimes you need them. And if that could, like, for instance, you could make a case of we need to sign another multifunctional defender, and he can play centre half, right back, and left back. That would be someone like Timber and Tomiyasu. That's literally the profile I'd like to have. But who knows? And to be honest with you, the names we've said, there'll probably be another name not mentioned, really. Like,
well, I'll add in as well, Kion Edwards.
Edwards as well. I just think with him, it's getting on to that age a bit in the striker position. But yeah, he's lit.
Yeah, I think he's been really unfortunate with in terms of minutes. I think he's someone that needs to have a loan move instantly. I think as terms of centre forward builds go, he's really complete in terms of his profile. And I think he needs to be, at the start of this season, I said that he really needs to be given some type of first team minutes in some capacity, whether that's whether that's for Arsenal or in sort of championship, whatever. It's integral for his development as a player, because physically he's ready, he's prepared.
Facts.
So yeah, he's another one as well. Obviously, we've seen very, very talented players move on this season. Lino Souza was probably one to watch.
Unfortunate,
in the fullback position, and obviously Charlie Patino's still at the club.
Love that guy, but pathways
again, super talented, but pathways, like you said, again, another load in the interior truck of players we have. And he's struggled at Swansea. He's had patches, but nothing concrete.
Yeah, since they've got a new manager, he's really struggled to get first team football. And to be fair, even Sego Jr., since he joined on loan in January, hasn't really been exposed to minutes. And in theory, Swansea was the better place because, not to say these lot are distracted by things that are not football, but in Swansea, there isn't much to do but focus on football. So from a lifestyle point of view, it would have been absolutely lovely. I wanted to, as we kind of close this up here, and I got some things for you before I let you get out of here. I wanted to ask you, in theory, because you kind of alluded to it, who do you think is easier to move on, Partey or Jorginho?
Jorginho, I think, absolutely, because he's on lower wages than Thomas Partey. He doesn't come in terms of how we bought him, which was on a 1.5-year deal or whatever it was, with options to extend. He doesn't have as many intangibles locked up as we do in the Partey contract.
Exactly.
Like, I would say, in terms of Thomas Partey, last summer, like I said, was the last year to get, I think, a lot of money out of him. I think we'd struggle with his availability issues to get over 35 million probably for him this summer. That if we got that'd probably be a really good deal. I think Jorginho is much cleaner to move on, because he's been largely a transition point for the midfield, right? Who's given us, and it's been integral that he's been around, because he's given us that ability to play with two big passers of the ball at all times in the midfield. Two players who can have 100 touches a game, and that's really important for our ability to control the ball. So absolutely, Jorginho. I think Partey is someone that is going to be trickier to get off the books, and in order to get him off the books, I think we'll have to compromise with how we are prepared to move him on and the fee we'll get for him.
And I think you're bang on. And I also feel like with Thomas Partey, it's not that he controls all the variables, because I don't think they will. But if Arteta and Edu sat there and said, you have to move on, then he's got something to do. But you could argue it's more away from his ability, just in terms of an asset. It's more in the club's interest to move on a 30-year-old that can't stay fit on big wages than him. He could run down his deal and say, do you know what? I've just had a kid. I've got a family. I'm living in London. I'm on wages that I could get handsome wages elsewhere if I go to Saudi, but it's not sure. I could run down my deal because this is an attractive club to be at. If I show my form, I might get more offers being a free agent next season. And it's an interesting one. I do think a lot of players are playing for their futures. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of reactionary stuff, but I feel in the same way Nelson and Eddie basically played their way into new deals. I think potentially Thomas Partey could save his future. I think potentially Emil Smith-Rowe could do that as well. And as you can see on screen here, like the comments around Smith-Rowe are quite positive from Arteta, but he's going to need to do a lot more to get in the plans. I think this is, before I get into what I wanted to ask you, I think this was a good question. Pick a striker you want in the summer, rumoured ones unavailable. So I think that rules out Sesko, Ivan Toney, Evan Ferguson, Osimhen. We've been linked with so many, Xerxes, Gyokeres, etc., etc. So yeah, if there is any strikers left, who would you go for? I'm going to go with a cheat code. I'm going to say Karim Adeyemi. He can play up front as well as on the flanks.
No, it's a really good point, because I think, to touch on Adeyemi, right, there's probably, in terms of transitional weapons that Arsenal have lacked in terms of having another runner outlet alongside Martinelli, the only two outside of Mudryk that are sort of that similar age category, and you're not sort of going then for the Rafael Leaos who can, like we said, carry a team up alongside them on their own, is the two you're looking at is Karim Adeyemi and Pedro Neto. And one of the two has got a flawless injury record, despite being obviously only 18, and the other has been really unfortunately crippled with injuries. And the idea of players being injury prone is a tricky one to navigate, because often players aren't injury prone. It's just how they're managed at a particular time. You've seen Lisandro Martinez this season just rush back countless times. He's not an injury prone player. The same can be said for Alexander Isak. I know that's not associated with the question, but he's not an injury-prone player. But yeah, I think in terms of strikers that have to have a think that aren't across the beaten track, I'm not one of the crew that's alongside Victor Gyokeres. I'm not part of.
Oh, let's start there. Let us carry on, but let us know your reasons why as well, because he's actually in the title. I was thinking of how am I going to ask you about this, but
so
you got that chemistry. It's like Ian Wright and Dennis Bergkamp, man.
So I'm a fan of him as a centre forward. A big fan of him as a centre forward. He's a brilliant channel runner, and like I was saying earlier, I really like the relentless type of strikers that sort of create their own gravity by occupying multiple defenders, drawing them out of position into channels, and also a box presence. I love how Gyokeres as well has that sort of attribute, that's that short backlift goal, and I think that's something
good goal against Benfica the other day.
Exactly, and that ability to generate so much power from a short backlift is something Arsenal lack in our whole squad in terms of profiles. I mean, I'll continue praising him for now before I draw in the counterpoints, because he's underrated in his.
No, we want to hear everything you got to say, man. Is right here.
No, he's underrated in his associative hold up play as well. But the thing I get to with Gyokeres is very similar to Nketiah. I think in the Premier League he's a top 5 to top 8 striker. I don't think he's elite in any of his post categories at the moment, and Arsenal are not at a point where we're looking for project strikers or transitional strikers. We need zone dominators And Gyokeres at the moment is a jack of all trades. And I think we're already looking to build a ceiling in Kai Havertz that can dominate the zone in the final actions. And I don't think we want another type of profile in that. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is most of his upside that Gyokeres have is actually to get us into the box. And I also think we have a lot of his attributes covered in the profiles we already have in the Arsenal squad. So I'm in the camp, like I said, that if we want that superstar attacker, I think we'll probably have to wait this summer and prioritise those sort of midfield upgrades. But Gyokeres is a very good forward. And like I said, that ability to have that short, snappy backlift and generate power like Salah does for Liverpool, like De Bruyne does for Man City, is like the only player really in the Arsenal squad who can do that is Fabio Vieira. But he's not quite the elite marksman that I think he's been coined as on social media. And the Portuguese league, with very good teams that they have at the top end in terms of a base of teams, is much closer to the Championship than I think people think. So Gyokeres is a no from me.
I mean, you tie into what I said in that I like Gyokeres. I think there's a lot of transferable skills. I think you would be a hit at Arsenal. I think you're good. I don't think you're great. I've always said I like all the aspects you do away from scoring. I think you'd bring something. But if we're talking about an elite striker, then if he signed and proved people wrong, that's great. But I don't quite think he's that yet. I do think there's an element of you're having a very hot season. And I think people need to kind of contextualize that. So we'll just have to say, and it goes back to what I've been saying on my channel in that I don't feel there's a striker that 100% convinces me. Obviously, there are on the market, but we're not going to go and get a Haaland or something. So we might have to take a risk on a sort of project that Mikel Arteta wants. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because I do like how this club will be, you know, you look at our failed pursuits of, you know, Vlahovic, Mudryk, Caicedo at a point, Locatelli, and there's many more. When we like someone, we'll go all the way for them. But if it doesn't feel like value for money or a bit half-hearted, we'll kind of stay clear. So I do think on one hand, if that's the sort of rhetoric around wanting a striker, then leave it, sign a winger, definitely sign a central midfielder and get over the areas. But I do think another striker takes us over the line because as good as we've been this season, I can't help but look at the Newcastle game where we just needed someone to take a chance. Aston Villa the same, West Ham the same. Bit different, but you could say recently against Manchester City. And if someone could do that, fair enough. On the theme of Newcastle, we both know it's probably unlikely we're going to get Bruno Guimarães. I have to pour cold water on these rumors because it seems the bulk of it is around FFP. But for what it's worth, if in an ideal world we could sign Bruno Guimarães, would you take him? Would you want him?
He's certainly one of the players on the list when you're looking at that all-phase centre mid role. You can play on the left. Most of my personal favourite is Frankie de Jong.
Yeah, but he's going to cost a lot.
Again, it's that marquee signing that is certainly difficult to get. I mean, I think the only way de Jong is sort of in Arsenal fans' head is because he's spoken before about wanting to go the Overmars route and sort of do that, I guess, inversely in the end. But like you have on your screen there, Joshua Kimmich, I think he's a player that a lot of top clubs should have their eye on.
1 year left on his deal.
And I think, interestingly, I think when we play Bayern Munich in the Champions League, having him where they play him at the moment as more of an out-and-out right-back who's able to come in field at times when they have complete control of the ball, but occupy most of the time holding the width. For a Bayern side, it's probably most important they have him there because they don't quite have the legs that Arsenal have in terms of winning the second balls, etc. And to put Kimmich in there next to someone like Pavlovic for Bayern Munich just to get overrun. So I think if we were to get Kimmich, it'd be very, very important to get someone like an Onana alongside him, because where Kimmich will work very, very well is if he has a more specific zone that he's able to take control of and dominate. He's actually very, very good 1v1 defensively, as we've seen in his time at right back in his
social media clips doing the round of that with him against Jadon Sancho. Now that he said
of course, and the multiple battles he's had with Kylian Mbappe as well, where he's more than held himself. The way he struggles is when obviously he's stretched sort of 180 degrees beside him. But if you keep him in a specific zone where you have the players around him to to help get him out. He's a really good potential signing for Arsenal. Of course, like we've said, he's versatile as well. He can play it right back and move into midfield, which is
a dream for Arteta, really,
exactly.
in terms of the player.
He can maybe in the top games he's not a lone six, but he can occupy that pivot role. He can play as a left centre mid, absolutely, and I still think that's under a different manager that would be a conversion. Zubimendi, I've always had I still have reservations of similar reasons about Kimmich defensively, in how in terms of he's stretched over big spaces and what the fee would be around him. I'll go back to what I said at the start, to upgrade our physicality and to replace Partey's passing, and that line breaker quality is the two core essential things for our midfield overhaul, if you want to call it that, this summer.
I mean, I'm a fan of Zubimendi. I like what you said about Onana. I don't think we'll go for Onana. What do you make of Doug? Before I ask you about Isaac, in theory of what Isaac is, what do you make of Douglas Luiz? Because I think he'll be priced out of the move, and I don't think he's perfect. But I think the player, if he was at Arsenal, I think he's a perfect player for Arteta within the squad.
Yeah, I said this on my channel a long time ago. Even if he's not the best player for our role, in terms of what you want in a number 8 or a left centre mid in this Arsenal season, he is the archetype, right? To call him a passer is to sum him up, but he's also a really good defender of space. He's really intense in his out of possession actions.
Set pieces as well.
Set piece, which of course
are 8 and a 6.
A little a sort of a dream for Arteta this season, giving Arsenal sort of that ascendancy in the fine margins. Like I was saying, how intense he is out of possession. Actually, he would still allow us to go man to man. He's a box crasher. He's that source of goals as well. He's a really complete option in the number 8, and a lot of people, I guess, probably before this season were maybe frowning on him slightly in terms of what he was as a player and the levels he can reach to. But he's a player that if we were to sign him, you genuinely cannot go wrong with Douglas Luiz. So I'm a really big fan of him.
Where are you at with, again, kind of off topic before you get onto Isaac, but where are you at with Arsenal Bayern Munich? Because I've watched your video, but if anyone hasn't, you need to go and subscribe at this moment in time too. Harvey does a great job, but you've kind of alluded to it. Like, where are you at with Arsenal Bayern Munich as well?
It's with the better team going into it. There's no question about that. I think when we can really get our tactical edge on Bayern is how we dominate the knockdowns in the center of the pitch and outrun them in that department. I think most likely it will be a Goretzka and Pavlovic pivot. Sasha Bowie, though, will be unavailable. It'll be Kimmich at right back there. Sort of, I felt quite sorry for Tuchel actually for a lot of this season, because at various points he said key players, without going into too much details, these key players that are out. But I think the way I summed it up in my video is that when you get to this stage of the Champions League, of course, it's ultimately very fine margins, and key battles, whether that's individually or collectively, other than quality, those key battles and dynamics ultimately define the games. And it's Bayern's choice whether they go sort of uber physical and athletic, and they play Upamecano, Kim Min-jae as a back two, with Goretzka in midfield, and really try to go toe-to-toe with Arsenal's athletic edge. And they're probably one of not many teams in Europe who can do that, Bayern Munich, and it's part of the reason why they're much more suited to the Champions League. Or whether they trust their ball players in the Pavlovic's, the Kimmichs, and play maybe De Vries and Eric Dyer at the back. And then there's a really big chance for Arsenal to hurt Bayern Munich. So that's sort of where I'm on the match at the moment. A lot will be dependent on who is available and when. But I think if Arsenal can go to the Allianz Arena with a lead, I think it'll be hard for Bayern Munich to break them down.
Listen, and obviously they've got Eric Dyer and Harry Kane, so make it even more sweeter if we win. The problem is, though, it only gets better after beating Bayern Munich. You got the small task of potentially Manchester City, who Arteta gives me confidence in to a degree. The Champions League, I don't know mentally how much of an impact that will have. And if you're not lucky enough to get Man City, the treble winners and the current holders, you get Real Madrid. So we wanted to sit at the big boys table. That's what comes with it. My final one for you then, broski, would be Isaac. In fact, I lied. Firstly, Isaac, and there actually is one more because you mentioned him. Well, you didn't mention him. There's two more. Apologies. So let me know your thoughts on Isaac, and then we'll talk about Xerxes. And let me find the tab. Tab police look away now. So yeah, let's start here. Three more.
Alexander Isak, yes. He's gained a lot of hype, I guess, in the last few weeks, hasn't he?
Last 24 hours to 48, really.
That's what it seems like. And that's not underrated at all. He's got a really special blend of attributes, I would put it, with Alexander Isak. And whether people want to chuck around comparisons to incredible players that I'm not going to name, that's sort of a different conversation. But the way, exactly. The way you can have such like this long-legged freak of a player with sort of the levels of ball manipulation that he has in the tight areas, that operates sort of like a 5'8", 5'9" Gabby Jesus, and also generate the running power that he has centrally and out wide. It's an incredible blend. I think the only thing I've ever had against Isak is nothing about his technical level, because that absolutely has the ability to succeed at any club on the planet, is just how he would do as sort of in those big tough games, how he would do with his back to goal. Because I know in terms of when you're playing up against Arsenal, it's as hard as they come, essentially, with our sort of ability to defend and cope with transitions. But I've always felt at times when he's played Arsenal, especially at the Emirates this year, he coasted through the game a little bit. And he's one of the players where you don't need to give him a handful of chances for him to punish you. But that would be the only thing I would ever raise against him. And he's definitely got the ceiling to, at the very least, make himself awkward against the back line, because that's sort of similar to Kai Havertz, that's the profile he gives. At the very least, in those top games, he's going to transmit that awkwardness in profile onto the back line. But going back to his technical and physical blend, is that ability to carry us up in the transition, to play in the small spaces as well. He knits play, as we've seen at Newcastle, so well, being able to rotate, but also stay in one part of the pitch. And that's been absolutely essential in his development this year, being able to stay in the centre forward position, not really rotate with anyone too much more, because you have Gordon space invading on the left. But Isak is absolutely fantastic. He would be a very good signing. But it just sums up the striker market. There's so many questions of how it can happen,
Catch-22,
if it will happen, fee, and it's just going to be very situational, I think, for Arsenal this summer, and they're going to have to see what rolls.
I think you're bang on the money. Not really aggressively linked with us anymore. And this article allegedly says he wants to join AC Milan despite interest from United, Arsenal, and Juventus. Joshua Zerxky, what do you make of him?
Zerxky,
apologies.
I've watched a little bit of him actually in the Serie A this season, but I'm not going to pretend to be an absolute sort of boss on him and being able to profile him quite like someone like Alexander Isak. But what you're getting in Xerxes is definitely a player similar to, like we touched on, in Gabby Jesus. And if you look at the four main pillars of what it takes to be a top class centre forward, that build up aspect is certainly one. And it's when we look at Arsenal as a force and as an attacking force, that build-up aspect is something that we have in abundance in Gabriel Jesus, in Kai Havertz, in Trossard, in their levels of associative.
Yeah, where they lack in goals, they do all the other stuff very well.
Exactly, and how they ghost in and around the box. And we're saying the one thing that we're completely lacking is that zone dominator at the final hurdle, the guy to pull the trigger in very small spaces. I think Xerxes can do that, but he's definitely got a tendency to dribble more like Jesus. But I think with him just
very
being
good playmaking abilities,
exactly,
which I wasn't struck with when I first got to know him.
Yeah, and look, like I said, he's got that build-up level of a striker absolutely down. He's also got the power with his frame being a lot taller than Jesus, to impact the game transitionally, which is again what other top strikers have to do, which seems to be that is the theme, right, with the strikers that we're seeing at top clubs now. It's the ability to run the channel, not just to an Nketiah a good degree, and to play maybe like a number 2 runner type to a more hold-up play, but to do it all on your own. And that's something Zirkzee has the potential to do, certainly. Probably not quite what Arsenal need in terms of the pillars of a centre-forward and what we lack profile-wise. But I'm a massive fan of Zirkzee, and I think him and Vlahovic are probably, along with Osimhen, they're the top 3 in Italy in terms of strikers.
And lastly, Eddie Nketiah. Apparently, Leicester, who are chasing promotion, Leicester City have entered the race to sign Eddie Nketiah, but face competition from Crystal Palace and Brentford, and Wolves have potentially been linked with him. What would you make of that? Like, because as you said earlier, he's one of our more sellable assets. Whatever people say about him, he's shown he can deputise and in a title challenge for Arsenal. He's an England international. He's probably the only striker at the club that can say they've worn the number 14. And yeah, where you at with that?
Again, with Eddie, I'm a massive fan with him. I think as number 2s go, I think people ask the world from him as a number 2. When, like I said, as number 2s go, I don't think it gets too much better than Eddie Nketiah. I think the most suited clubs for him would be like a Brentford or a West Ham. Brentford, you could already see him striking up a partnership in that sort of Visa role alongside Tony. That would be mincemeat. And I genuinely believe Nketiah is the type of player, if you give him, I think, the responsibility that he craves. And I think there's been a lot of justified criticism of Nketiah, and how he's sort of, when he's made those cameo substitute appearances, how he normally plays for himself maybe a bit more than the normal type of player, and is a bit greedy and a bit selfish, as opposed to when he gets that starting berth. I think he's a player when you give him that responsibility, as even not if he's not the main man.
He's got a great attitude as well, man.
Yeah, if he's starting week in, week out, you'll see a player who absolutely runs his socks off, can be absolutely devastating in the final third. And you'll also, whoever will be buying him, will be buying him probably at a pip of his price in the future, because we've seen with the level of senior minutes that he's had, this guy is someone that's due a complete explosion at the top level in maybe 2 or 3 years'
time. Greatest ability is he surprises people.
Yeah. When this guy gets to 26, 27, you could easily see him absolutely exploding as a football player, because that's sort of where the level of minutes that he's had at this point, which is very underutilized for a 22, 23-year-old, has taken him. So massive fan of Eddie, and wherever he goes, if it's the right fit, he will be an absolute hit for them.
As you said, it'll be a hit, and it'll be interesting to see, not just in terms of outgoings, but incomings. Will there be any shock incomings like the Kai Havertz ilk? Will there be any shock outgoings? You never know what Arsenal and Mikel Arteta are planning, but it's exciting. It's definitely exciting what we're doing on the field, and we're finally back to the big time, maybe an exaggeration. We need to win trophies, but we're on the right road. We just don't know the ETA on the sat-nav. Harvey, I can't lie to you. This is why I wanted to get you on the platform for quite a while. It's a fantastic chat with someone who absolutely knows football. Let people know they can find you, man, because I'm a massive fan of your content, man. People, this guy is a tactical and graphical genius. Go and read his content. Well, better yet, watch it. But he does a lot of pictures and stuff where you can read. It's quite interesting. And I would actually suggest, if you haven't heard about this man before, go and watch his Bayern Munich preview. Like it was truly a masterpiece, man. Well, let's hear from the horse's mouth, man.
Well, I think that's undeserved, such kind words.
No, man, it's definitely not. It's definitely not. Don't downplay yourself. You're sick at what you do, man.
Well, yeah. My name is just Harvey Gration on YouTube, Twitter page as well. I will be very soon as my university dissertation is done and other deadlines at the end of this holiday, which is literally 2 or 3 weeks left. For the run-in, the business end, May time, I'm going to have videos coming thick and fast. So if you want to time your subscription right, it would be now. But I can't thank you enough for having me on again. Like I said, I enjoy chatting you two so much. A a genuine Arsenal and football fan. And let's do it again whenever we can.
Whenever we can, man. As soon as the dissertations are done, let me know. And people, I will say I disagree with him on one thing. Fuck waiting. Go and subscribe now. All you got to do is go on YouTube. You don't have to type in his name. His YouTube channel is tagged in the bio. Just click that subscribe, turn on your notifications. And whether it's now, whether it's May, whether it's whenever, you will have your information in relation to him. Harvey, it's been a fantastic, just
Thanks
short
so
of
much.
90 minutes, man. Appreciate you. His analysis is always on point. So that's what the people are saying. So go and find him there. But I've taken up too much of this guy's time. Let you get out of it, man. Hit the like button, subscribe, and all that good stuff, people. Let us know your thoughts and everything we've discussed. Harvey, take care of yourself. Best of luck with your uni exams and whatnot. And we'll link up again soon, bro. Peace. Come on, my guy.
There's always just that active and defending. I think it's like